Now, to our wonderful speakers today, firstly, thank you so much for coming all the way to speak at this conference. Those of us in architecture, we're really grateful, especially you traveled from so far, and some of the projects that you have done are really amazing. So we're going to be starting. So as a reminder, if there are any questions from the floor, please stand by at the mics. Otherwise, I'll read from the questions that I've received. And the first one goes to Sung Hoi Kim. Can you take us through the process of achieving the 6-month design and construction building?
Yes, 6 months project is not unusual, even in Korea. When I met a client, he wanted to finish his project within 6 months because the dynamic of his business. So I start to figure out what space is needed, and then I start to design. After the design, we co-work with structural engineer, and then first we finish structural system, and then we make out for the building permission drawings, and then just after the building permit, we start to build. And after that, we
Sorry, just very quickly, how long did your building permit take?
It takes 1 month.
Wow. Very good.
And then we start to make envelope detailing and interior design. So during the construction for the foundation, the structural factory, the steel structure, so they make the part of steel structure. Then after finish the foundation, they combine the elements.
Very good. Just moving on to something related to that as well. Another question was, what was the most challenging phase in the 6 months of the design and build? How long does it take to get the design finalized? As well as curious to know the phases of work program and how you arranged it. Actually, you answered a little bit about that already.
Yeah, right. That project takes 6 months. Also, the design time is also 6 months. So from the start to the end of construction, we design and design and design. The most difficult thing is the client's mind. During the construction, if the clients change something, it's impossible. Fortunately, during the construction,
because you're committed to the structure.
Right.
Okay. How about the challenge? Any other challenges that you'd like to share?
In order to finish the building within 6 months, we have to think about your structural system. So very simple and very fast fabricate way of design is very important. Modulation and how to put the electric and mechanical system. It is free from the structural system. So, and driver system. So that kind of thing is very important. The wet construction should be minimized.
Thank you very much. So we'll just quickly move on to Architect Karim. There's a question here. I heard Bunga Raya Resort had won an award. Can you explain what the award was and how did you achieve it?
Basically, the award was done in 2 stages. There was a national assessment. It is with a group called FAIBCI, F-A-I-B-C-I. It's a French, it's a group of membership on developers and development companies. And what they do is we invite, I believe we invite them to assess, nominate, and they come and make an assessment for the national level. And for the international level, they come quietly. They don't tell you that they're making an assessment. So you cannot give a free dinner and a special treatment. They come in as guests quietly. So the award was given in Cyprus, I think about 5 years ago. I can't remember. So basically, it placed the resort in a different footing. The ground handlers, start calling up and they say, we've got guests interested in your award, to your resort just because of the award. Different. It's actually for a development, not just architecture. It includes construction, services, and management, including environmental management. So it's a total thing. So it's not my award. It's the company's developers award.
Very good. Just a reminder, everybody, if you'd like to ask questions, please stand by at the mic. Otherwise, we'll go through these questions over here, yeah? We really encourage on.
My name is Jalil. I would like to ask a question on architect James. I saw you got a lot of beautiful resorts and chalet in Philippines, in the jungle. My question is, how did you manage to control the mosquitoes?
Yeah, I've been to the Boracay site a few times during design, a few times during construction. I've stayed there 4 times since it's been open. And I don't know mosquitoes. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because it's Boracay Island or, but no, I don't remember the mosquitoes. I remember being very difficult to walk the property. There were no trails, there was no roads, and we literally had to hack our way through the jungle with machetes, walking the whole site, trying to get the feel for the property. And it was pretty exhausting. But we didn't encounter any, strange things or mosquitoes. The bats were the most interesting thing. There was a whole colony of the fruit bats, and at sunset every day there's a unique Boracay colony variety, and unfortunately there isn't a lot enough food for them on Boracay. So at sunset they would all fly to neighboring islands to feed, and so it was really interesting. Hundreds of them just take off at the same time and just head out to sea.
That sounds a bit like a scene from Batman. So just on that, James, there's a question here. So it just shows that you've done so many different kinds of projects in different areas with different contexts and maybe historical background. And the forms that you have used are quite varied. So, you have so many different local contexts and forms. How do you actually take the time to do your context study and understand the background? Because it does show from your work that you've got so many different types of forms that are probably sensitive to its context. How does that process work, and what's your design process like?
Yeah, we start every project with a design charrette on site with the client, and depending on the size of the project, that can be 3 to 5 days. And we all, in addition to that, we'll spend a few days looking at local museums. It's one of the first things we like to go to is local museums. There is no you know, every client and every location, it's so different, and what's available or not available, and how you sort of, well, what we often say, you kind of peel the onion. You got to peel the layers of the onion, and you think you're getting to the core, and you realize it's going to take a while. And what drives us is the passion, right? The curiosity. You know, you've got to be really curious to learn about things, want to know about things, and you've got to have, you know, good listening skills, and those things take patience. So if you got the passion to help drive that, then you know you're gonna do well, and the answers come, the discovery comes, but you have to be curious enough to keep asking the questions, to sort of keep peeling the layers off until you get to the good stuff.
Great, thank you. I have a question here for Barish. What's your secret weapon in winning a design competition? And what are the ways or the process from concept to final submission? I remember you were sharing something about you quite early on in your career, you won you got to the finals.
Yeah.
What was that process like? And over here the question is, what's your secret weapon?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I ain't gonna tell you. I'm joking. I think it's not a secret. I think it's a fact in life that you need to be inspired yourself to do inspiring things. So I think if you can design something that really inspires you as a designer, I think you will actually add more value to the project. And I also believe that it's a journey as a designer, and you need to really experiment and push the boundaries, and always keep asking the what-if questions. And usually that begins at the briefing stage. So the brief might not always be right. You've got to question that brief. And actually, if there is a secret, I would say that is a secret. And what's interesting is early on, when I was 23, when I was selected as a finalist in the competition, one of many competitions that I did after that, I think that experience was definitely good. And sitting in front of the judges, it was probably the most nervous thing I ever had to do. But I learned so much about that process, and less about doing competitions, but actually what inspires me as a designer. And I think as designers, we always have to question what it is that we are doing and what is our sense of purpose. I think you can add much more value, not just to the projects, but also to the communities that we're building these buildings for.
Great, great. And just on that, Barish, now that you've done exciting and iconic designs and projects...
I need to pay someone who's saying these comments, right?
Yeah, and even cities being built that you've designed. What's your next plans?
Okay, well, I need to correct a few things. So usually projects, there are many people that work on a project. So if you're heading a project, I mean, you can't take all the credit. So it's actually a big team, engineers, different professions that are influencing the evolution of projects. And it's important that we recognize all the team that actually work. So that was the first part. Sorry, what was the second part?
Sure. Just so you've had quite a bit of this experience, competitions. What are some of your future plans and your next steps in either your career or some of your next plans? Do you have any specific plans that you can share with us?
Well, right now I'm heading the projects at C-Nexus for Sustainable Cities. So there's some exciting stuff that's happening on those projects, and I think we're learning a lot from the first model of a sustainable city in the MENA region. So it's become a pilot project, and I think it's really trying to learn and actually really do something that is much better than the last project. And I always believe that your last project should always be your best project. That's what you have to do as a designer, to do something that is really good and unique. So I always approach every project like it is really the last one I'm going to do. And you never know. in this part of the world that so many things are happening, and I think as designers there's a lot of value that we can add to protect the environment and also provide many benefits to even the people who can't have access to housing. You know, housing is a huge issue, not just in UAE in particular, and the situation there is very different than many other places in the world. So I think as designers, there's also a role to highlight some of these issues and not just be focusing on designing projects.
And I suppose just as a general question, just as a general reminder, we're going to have a question soon, that the context in which you're speaking to are a lot of architects in the room, as well as young, aspiring, new graduates. So if they would, in any of your conversation with us, if there's anything that you could encourage us in this direction of the tourism of architecture, that would be great. Anything you'd like to say or butt in, please do so. Otherwise, we would have a question from the floor. Yeah?
Hello, I'm Lee. I have a question for Mr. Varsh. In regards to sustainable cities in serving tourism and communities, shouldn't sustainable architecture take a step backwards rather than pushing and portraying a modern lifestyle that most inhabitants cannot catch up with?
Okay. So usually when we work on these projects, we're working very closely with the developers. So they've got to be economically viable. So they are very much part of the process, even at the early stage. And even the typologies, they have a very certain type of typologies that you want to actually build. So we have to work with that, and there has to be a balance, because at the end of the day, these projects are private projects. So the developer has to, be able to sell them. So it's almost like a balance. You're trying to push the boundaries, but at the same time, you have to satisfy the economics. So when we talk about sustainable cities, the economic sustainability is part of that, and that's part of the process. So it's got to work.
Okay, great. And just building on that, let's dig a little bit deeper on your philosophy on sustainable cities. Like I think just building on what he was saying, planting trees and filling dead deserts with water requires huge financial costs. I think you talked about the financial part already, to fight against nature. But what do you think? Is it truly possible to be sustainable, or with this man-induced self-sustaining in Dubai? Do you have any conflicts or thoughts, or what are your thought processes or your philosophy on that?
Sure. The tourism industry in Dubai is growing. So by just the next 2 years, there's going to be 45 million tourists coming to UAE. So I think it's a good thing that we're trying to push towards ecotourism, because the alternative is mass tourism, and the alternative is that there'll be operators building, the status quo resorts out in the deserts. So I think it's good to encourage them to go towards eco-resort models. And I think it's about, again, balancing, trying to satisfy the needs of both the operators and also trying to bring the benefits to those neighborhoods, those local communities. So a lot of the conversations that we had, both with the clients and the operators, is trying to really think about what is a genuine ecotourism experience. And it's not just about the experience that happens inside the resort. Where are the products coming from? Is it going to benefit the farmers who are working adjacent to these plots? Can we provide a second job opportunities to the people who also work there? So there's a lot of conversations that happen. And I think when we talk about United Arab Emirates, we have to push towards this model of sustainable tourism and ecotourism. And there's always going to be resorts that's going to be built in those pristine locations. So we have to make the best use of that.
Great, thank you. So, one question here.
Hello, yeah. I think my question is add on to Mr. Paharaj, because we're talking about either sustainable or ecotourism. So I think I want to extend a bit, like we are curious where you get the water supply for a construction of a project in the middle of the desert. And also, let's say in case any fire hazard, so how you overcome this problem? They also noticed that most of your design, I just glance through from your perspective, look like it's a modern approach with a lot of solar panels. But I think maybe you should consider something like a wind tower, like you explained in your second project, can bring some like ventilation and natural one. I'm not sure, or maybe you designed already, but you didn't explain in detail just now. Then I think the last one, because we never design anything in the desert, is there any possibility in the desert after, I believe after a few years there is sometimes they have some storm water. If the storm water happen at this desert, whether it's in your design consideration, you have certain detention pond or naturally there is a pond at the middle of the project is considered as a detention pond. Actually, just clear our curiosity there because here we never had this exposure to this sort of project. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, there was quite a lot of questions in there.
I'll try to address a few of them. Regarding the questions about water, actually, what was interesting on the first time that I went to the site, we noticed there's actually infrastructure there. And Liwa is actually a modern, there's a lot of modern infrastructure and we can actually feed into the grid. But we actually work with very good engineers that can actually come up with solutions using the wastewater to actually turn it into grey water. But potable water comes from the grid. The other questions that you had, the design process is actually a very complex process. There are many specialities that actually contribute to the project. The first thing that we try to do is before we actually think about any active solutions, try to think about the passive ones, how we can make the most of the form or the orientation or the densities to actually cool down the buildings. So with the sustainable city, before we even thought about the cooling towers, we made sure that all the villas didn't have direct sunlight into the villas because that's where you're going to reduce the amount of heat and reduce the amount of cooling that's required. And the decisions for the wind is to try to make some air movement because air movement is key within the city to cool it down.
Great, thank you. So we'll move a little bit down this way again to Karim. You know, Karim, you're a very experienced and established architect in a.k.a. in Sabah who've been practicing. Would you be able to share with us some of your thoughts in terms of the opportunities and directions of the architecture of tourism in Sabah, now that Sabah is very much a growing tourism destination?
Okay, if you look at what we have here in Sabah, almost all our inventory, our resources are nature-based. So it's actually, and the trend worldwide is environment, green. So we are in a perfect position. And we also have all this forest conservation program, the heart of Borneo, as you saw in the presentation before. So I would say if you want to get into the plane that is about to take off, go green. And I think even the Ministry of Tourism now, they have declared for all our resorts they have green program and accreditation, GBI. Although there's a lot of talk about you are not what do you call it? You are addressing only for 3-year program. After that, you don't need to be green anymore. You know. But if you absorb the system into your understanding of nature, you don't have to think about green anymore. You don't have to do all it. You just naturally do it. Yeah. And I think for the future, go green. I think that's one big way. And also have context in your approach, have meaning. Whatever you do, relate to what's immediately around you, so that rather than being more vegetative, it's more responding to nature. I think that's my advice.
Great. Great, thank you. And Mr. Somoy Kim, there is a question here that we have. We noticed that your projects are quite colorful. You have quite a few primary colors, specific kind of colors, which is quite interesting. Could you share a little bit more about your design process? Is it that after you've done some of the form or the design on the form, then you add the colors onto the modeling, or it's been part of the thought process from the very beginning? Is there any system or concept that you use in terms of categorizing or the reason why you use some of the colors?
It's very difficult to say. The design process is very different by each project. So some project wanted to finish as soon as possible. Some project wants to have the high-end quality. So the nature of every project is a little bit different. So the important thing is the architect should lead the context of project. So first I lead the situation and the context of the project itself, and then I set up the design process for that project. And usually I start with the visiting the site. The site tells a lot. At the same time, I had to hear the client's needs and what he wants. And then I start with hand drawings, and then we develop it into a 3D modeling. So every project I check with a 3D modeling in detail. So 3D modeling go to the construction site, so the construction engineers see the 3D modeling in details. So there is no big difference between drawings and the finishes.
Great. Interesting. And just give a bit of time for the floor if there are any other questions.
Hello, my name is Melissa. I've got two questions for Mr.
Maharaj.
Yes, Maharaj. So the first question is, I've seen that most of your scale of projects are actually quite large scale. Do you think that even with a small plot of land, say about 3 acres, would tourism architecture work? Like what you've shown through your process with the space work with such small scale? Because given that if everything is big scale, I'm sure there are certain plots of land in the city that are way smaller. Could those detailing be applied, and would it still work as efficiently as what you've shown?
Yeah, I mean, design is trying to meet a brief requirement, and I think what's exciting about good design is when you have these challenges. So if there's a challenge there to actually design such a project, I think you will find a good designer who will actually come up with a good response. And I think right now we are at an exciting moment within the urban cities where actually we have so little space and we can do some creative things with that. So it's not just about big scale projects. I think as a designer you have to be versatile and work at different scales.
Thank you. That's the first. The second question is about the efficiency of solar panels in a sustainable city. So I think 2 years back, during one of the projects we were working with a GBI consultant in KL. So we were looking at installing solar panels, and they were talking about the efficiency and cost. But it wasn't too efficient in a way because the efficiency of the solar panels would drop over the number of years. So given that solar panels was heavily installed in your project, what's the number of years that it would last, and would that affect eventually the sustainable aspect of the project?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways you can look at this. So some people would argue, even imagine solar is like free money coming from the sky. So even if you could just capture 20% of that, that's a good thing. And there are others who are very, diehard, and they want to get the most efficiency So in the Sustainable City, we have the C Institute, which is monitoring the efficiency of the panels throughout the whole year. And we think that maybe 7 to 10 years is going to be the rough payback. But the benefit is not just for the developer. So even if it does, so when we say it's not as efficient as what we think, the benefit is to the residents. So the energy bills is significantly reduced. In fact, some of them, like if they can manage to harvest enough energy, then they, for that cycle, they don't have to pay any bills. So I think there is an economic benefit for developers because the end user is actually going to see all that benefits.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. And I think the technology is moving so fast, isn't it? And I suppose in the future, the efficiency of things are going to improve.
Yeah.
It's only going to improve.
I have a solar panel on my roof in my house, and I think it costs about 100-something thousand to install. This is not using battery. Usually the problem is battery. You cannot store energy well, and after 2 years the battery has to be replaced. But what the system involved is you collect the energy, emit it into the grid. And that means the power SESB buy it from you, and they are required to buy at a higher price than what you're paying for because it's clean energy. So every month I get about 1,000 plus, 1,500. So I know that now, although I've invested some money earlier on, it's like buying a car, but now when I use electricity, I switch on the light, I say, oh, that's free, that's free, that's free. Every time I look at it because the electric bill is offset so much. And after a number of years, it will become free to you in terms of what SAS is buying from you. So at a micro scale, it's already working. So if you look at the bigger scale, I mean, it's supposed to last about 25 years, yeah, 30 years now, yeah. Net metering. In terms of the panel itself, they will last 30 years. Although their efficacy will reduce in time. But definitely you will make money at the end of the day. It's just investment.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that as well? And also there's a social value to that people don't understand, that if you make them a feature within the project and actually make it visible, it becomes part of the lifestyle and it becomes an educational tool as well. So I think it's always good to integrate it with the architecture rather than just hide it somewhere else.
Just on a similar parallel for James, we have a question here. So in your presentation, a lot of your projects involve nature. Could you suggest, is there anywhere or any moment you can capture that similar kind of concept but in a city hotel? So a lot of your projects are very much out with pristine nature and already have a lot of inherent value. For those of us who are designing city hotel projects, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't show any here because we don't have any of them built yet, but we have designed a few what we call urban resorts. And it doesn't take a lot of space to create a courtyard, right? That's at a human scale that you're going to like. You know, the opposite is often true, where courtyards are too large, and you enter it and you just don't feel comfortable in the space, right? And you leave. So having smaller urban sites doesn't mean that you're not going to have the opportunity to create some kind of outdoor space and landscape it well. There was a design competition in Waikiki, which is the big resort destination in Hawaii and Honolulu, and there's a redevelopment of an existing project, and Waikiki is very urban. We call it the urban jungle, and high-rise hotels and small sites. And there was a big redevelopment of an existing hotel property. And there was 5 firms submitting, and my scheme was the only scheme that actually carved out a courtyard. It was a natural, to us it was a natural. They were all doing big boxes, taking up the whole site with building. And we wanted to create a hula mound, more of a traditional hula mound, where they sing and dance. And we created this sort of circular courtyard, and the retail and F&B was sort of amphitheater style, or particularly the F&B seating on the second level had an amphitheater sort of stepped dining, circling this thing. And it became a nice gateway off the diagonal corner that took you straight to the beach. And things like that, to us, are just, it's kind of a no-brainer. And that scheme, same amount of floor area, right? We maximized the density, met all the developer program, and because they're going to push the envelope. So you don't have to compromise. You don't have to compromise the building program in order to carve out the space. It's yeah.
Okay, good. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be concluding very soon, so probably only 1 or 2 more questions. If there are any burning questions, please come to the mic. Otherwise, I have one here for James as well. Now that the demographic of tourists traveling around the world is changing, for example, let's say Chinese tourists are starting to travel in the, I don't know, hundreds of thousands or something like that. How does that influence or change the way we are designing for either mass tourism, as was mentioned, or has that affected your practice now that you're also doing projects from China and things like that?
Yeah, more on the F&B side than anything. They're going to these destinations for the same reasons. We're all going to them, because it was some kind of fantastic site or whatever. And so you're not changing that aspect of it, but you'll definitely need to bring in a Chinese restaurant into the F&B program. What's really interesting, like Maldives, for an example, the Chinese are flocking to the Maldives like crazy, and it was really curious to me at the time, because historically they don't swim. The waterways of China have been they're more or less the sewer system for thousands of years. So they have a history of really not getting in the water. They don't get in their lakes and their rivers, and you just don't. And so up until recently, not that many of them even knew how to swim. And then we were building all these resorts in Sanya for them, and they won't go in the swimming pools during the daytime. So they prize their shade. They don't want to get tanned, and so they'll go to the swimming pools at night. So I'm thinking, like, well, why are they going to the Maldives, and which is wonderful scuba diving and snorkeling, and you actually you stand in a villa that's over the water, and you probably don't even know how to swim. But they're flocking to it, and they are quickly learning to scuba and snorkel. So and I'm sure it's got to be the younger generation that's actually there is a whole generation now that's old enough in China that's been part of really this boom in the last 20 years. And the things that have been available to them were unthinkable to their parents and their grandparents. So it's a whole different, it is a really different game changer.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Now, I'd like to just give each of you just a quick few sentences in conclusion. If there's anything last that you'd like to say, any encouragement for the rest of the architects or graduates or other building industry professionals here today, or especially in regards to the architecture of tourism. If there's anything you'd like to say, we'll just give just the last few words for each of you. If you'd like to address the crowd or whatnot, we'll just give you the opportunity.
I'm going to go with you, go green.
I'd say have an entrepreneurial spirit, and the most important is never lose your sense of humor.
Yeah, I will go with him too. Actually, I believe you have to be passionate about what you do. You have to have a strong belief that what you do is significant. I think that is important.
Architecture always begins from the reality of life. So I believe the future is in the everyday life of yours. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a final round of applause. Thank you so much for coming all the way. We are very appreciative. We hope that you come back to Sabah one day to enjoy the beaches and the resorts. I know your time is so tight. Yeah, maybe you can, or you can take them around. So, ladies and gentlemen, one final round of applause.